I've struggled with depression since I was 12 years old, but I didn't realize that that's what I was dealing with until about 4 years ago. It was at a difficult time in my life. I had just gotten out of an unhealthy 3-year-long relationship, and I felt really brokenhearted. A lot of my future plans kind of fell through all at the same time, and I didn't know what was next for me. I had gone to church all my life, but I felt like I must be doing something wrong because my life wasn't going according to plan. God just didn't seem to work for me like he did for everyone else, so I thought I must be a bad Christian. I could look back and remember times in my life when I felt connected to him, but I didn't feel that way anymore. I thought I had messed up his plan somewhere down the line, and there wasn't a way for me to get back. Slowly, I started distancing myself from him. I stopped praying. I stopped going to church and found a new group of friends. Eventually, I came to the decision that God was real, but I didn't want to be a Christian because I just wasn't good enough for him. Gradually, my depression deepened. It happened slowly, so I didn't realize how bad it was getting. I started to be late to class and work every day, and sometimes I couldn't get myself out of bed to go anywhere at all. This sense of profound numbness and worthlessness enveloped my life, and that's when the suicidal thoughts started. Eventually, suicide was all that I could ever think about. It kept building up, and I just felt really frustrated because I just didn't see any kind of way out of how I was feeling, and I didn't think to pray because I felt like God was done with me and that I had pushed him away, so he wasn't going to come back. One night I left work and I went and parked my car up on the rims, and I just felt like I couldn't do it anymore. So I decided it was time to come up with a plan to kill myself. I wasn't going to tell anyone, I was just going to do it. And I felt some guilt when I thought about how my family and my friends would feel, but ultimately I decided that they would be better off without me. I felt like I wasn't really contributing anything socially anymore because I was just constantly trying to put on this front to make them think that I wasn't depressed, and I was tired of it. So I had really withdrawn myself from a lot of people. As I was planning my suicide, I felt this sense of relief because it meant that something was finally going to change for me. Sitting in my car that night, it didn't occur to me how completely wrong my thinking was, but at the time I couldn't see any other way out of it. As I was sitting there and I was planning what I was going to do, I suddenly had this sense that someone was in the car with me. It's hard for me to describe, but there was like a presence sitting in the passenger seat. Then I heard this voice audibly saying over and over, "You are enough." I instantly knew it had to be God, and I freaked out a little bit, and I asked him, "What do you mean? Why do you keep saying that?" Because I had heard in songs that he is enough, but him telling that me that I am enough, it just didn't make any sense. And he told me that I will always be enough for him. He told me that in his eyes, I was worth the sacrifice of Jesus, and that I was worth his pursuit of me. At that moment, I broke down and I started weeping for the first time in months. I had just kind of suppressed all of my feelings probably for a couple of years at that point, and I hadn't cried. Even when this relationship ended, I hadn't cried. And it was like the numbness that was like insulating my heart was pierced, and I suddenly felt like I had value, and I was reassured that God hadn't forgotten about me. So that night we talked for a couple of hours, and he told me that I hadn't known him for who he really is. I thought that he was going to discard me because I was broken, and it felt like I couldn't come back from that. But he wanted to restore me. He wasn't ever planning to leave me in brokenness. He came to me when I needed him, even though I wasn't asking him to. He saw through all of this mess that I had surrounded myself in, and he saw a destiny for me. He also told me that night that I needed to get help for my depression. The fact that God even acknowledged my depression was really comforting for me, because I felt like it was dismissed or not taken seriously by most of the Christians that I knew. This encounter with the Lord prompted me to tell my family and a couple of close friends that I was struggling. They, of course, didn't know anything was going on because I was always trying to hide it. And it was really hard for me to be honest with them and open up to them about it, but I did, and I was grateful that I did. I eventually went through therapy, and I had people supporting me through that, and I was really thankful for that. During that time, I found a great deal of healing. I also renewed my relationship with the Lord again, and I began getting to know him for who he really is. My journey to mental health has not been easy. There's been a lot of times where it seems like the depression is coming back, or there are periods of time where I struggle again, but none of them have ever reached the point where it did when I was so suicidal. So ultimately, I feel like I'm getting better all the time, and whatever setbacks I have are not as bad each time. So now, fast forward to 4 years later, I've moved to a new city. I've made a bunch of new friends, which I would never have been able to do when I was so severely depressed. I'm getting a master's degree in a field that I absolutely love, and I would have never been able to do that if I was depressed. I'm serving in a wonderful church. I feel like I have a really deep relationship with the Lord, and that we have history together. I'm just grateful for every day that I didn't commit suicide, and that I decided to do something about my depression with the Lord's help, because I would not have had the opportunity to do any of this. And ultimately, I just want to say that God's heart is for you, and he is not going to stop pursuing you. And just like he gave me a future and a hope, he can do that for anyone.